Rimuru Tempest. If you've been on the channel for a while, you could probably maybe tell that I kind of like Rimuru. Just a bit though, I'm definitely not obsessed or anything. Right guys? Right? But with that being the case, I've made multiple videos on him, and my first ever video was based on why I thought Rimuru was the best Isekai MC. And I promised it wasn't biased. See, it's even in the title. That means it has to be true. But there were a couple of problems. First off, that video was my first ever, so obviously a couple of stuff weren't explained as well as I'd prefer. And two, it seems like it was pretty hard for people to read through the lines of the things that I did get well. So I thought, why not do a redo where this time I gave Rimuru the credit that he's due. So with that being said, let's begin. Now the first and most obvious thing, which is a pretty small detail in the grand scheme of things, but it's still important, is the way that Rimuru died. Now we're all used to the classicness of Truck-kun robbing a poor soul of their chance to lose their virginity, then being granted a second time in another world and somehow still fail. But with Rimuru, it wasn't our long-awaited Isekai guard that sent him to the gallows. This time, it was a more realistic way that my Brits can definitely relate. Nope, can't make that joke. Now, does this small detail make the series better than every other Isekai out there just because he died differently from everyone else? No, not necessarily, but it does make the story feel fresh. But going back to the main points, after he gets stabbed, you'd expect him to get his human body back like another sad individual whose V-card is still in their wallet. So all we have to do is wait for his otherworld adventure to— nope, he's a slime. A jiggly, slimy, hentai monster. But hey, if it comes with the perks of having this done to me, slurp slurp. But the series starting out like this was a breath of fresh air from the classic either give me back my old body or bring me a new one that's completely unrelated to what I was previously. And yes, Rimuru was not the first, nor was he the only one, and he won't be the last to do this. Especially in a time when we have everyone trying to make their MC reincarnated as a vending machine or a hot spring. But even with that being the case, there are other things about Rimuru that I think make him better than those characters to begin with, which is the main point I was trying to make in the first video. But again, we'll get down to that later. But just because he's a slime doesn't mean that he follows the traditional route of being weak and for some reason enjoys caressing the skin of cat girls and elves. Nope, instead they end up caressing him, and it ended up being the case that he was much stronger than most characters as soon as he was born for obvious reasons. Not to mention the fact that he's a slime led to his power development being really interesting. And some people like to clown on the fact that Rimuru got his powers easily, and while I can't disagree, I genuinely challenge you to find just one Isekai MC that didn't get their power just thrown at them. Obviously they exist, but remembering them in a split second is probably not the easiest. And even with that being the case, I still don't think that Rimuru got his powers just thrown at him. We've seen his development over the course of the series, and we can definitely say that while he might not have gone through rigorous training to get to the level that he is right now, he didn't just sit around and do nothing and somehow became one of the strongest in the series, unlike some creatures. And on top of that, they also say that he doesn't have much depth as a character as a whole. Now, does Rimuru have the same level of emotional depth and character development as someone like Rudius or Subaru? No, he doesn't, because that's not what his story is about. His story is exactly what it's supposed to be, a story about that time I got reincarnated as a slime. Subaru's and Rudius's story are completely different from what Tensura is about, but that doesn't mean that the character development of Rimuru is lacking in any way. I think the main reason why people think he doesn't have much growth or development as a character is because they can't see the permanent change in the way Rimuru deals with his enemies. So for example, they realize the brutality and mercilessness of Rimuru demolishing Clayman, then wonder why on earth he doesn't have this same energy 24/7. And the answer is pretty easy, because there's no need to. Rimuru said it multiple times. If you try and be friendly with him, then you're good. You don't need to be his friend, just don't be his enemy. Compared to when he just started out as a leader and realized that the one rule he put in place ended up hurting his people, His completely friendly attitude towards humans took a sharp shift. He doesn't hate humans by any means, but he's no longer as blindly trusting as he was before. This shift reflects real growth as he learns and adjusts to be a better leader. If what most people expect is edgy brooding vibes like Hajime, then that's just not Rimuru's style. His development isn't as in your face as you'd expect, but it's still solid and fits the tone of the story perfectly. I'd even say it's above average compared to many other isekai protagonists. So with that being taken care of, let's move on to the next part. The most important thing in any isekai. Well, being an isekai. And you're probably asking, what do you mean? Well, what I mean is it should have all or at least most of the classic isekai format. Another world obviously overpowered yada yada yada. And a good one is one that takes all of those tropes and turns it into an actual plotline. And for Tensura and how it does with being a good isekai, it does amazingly. Just in case you still have no idea what I mean, look at something like Eminence in the Shadow. When you look at it, Sid is the perfect example of an isekai MC. He's overpowered, cringy, dense, but also gives you those satisfying moments that you love in isekais. If I was supposed to take one character to show to my friends to tell them what they should be expecting when they get into isekais without having them look at me weirdly, I'd probably show them Sid. Though again, I'll explain why he's not number one later. But what I'm trying to say is that Rimuru has the best parts of what an isekai and their MC should be like. He's overpowered, has those satisfying moments, and it's not just in fights, but also fan service. And the story never strays from the fact that it's an actual isekai. It still feels like one no matter how far you go in through the series. In fact, it's actually more prevalent later on than in the beginning or in the middle. And with that said, it's time to move on again. This is the final and honestly one of the most important things to me personally when it comes to why I love Rimuru so much. And that is his character design. Rimuru's design is one that you don't really see that much. I mean, when you look at most isekai characters and their designs, yeah, it's pretty much just Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, just copy and pastes. But not all characters are this boring. You have MCs like Ainz or Shirori, or even Rudius if we're going for a more simple route. But honestly, my favorite still stands as Rimuru. Shirori's a close second, and honestly, she probably does have a better design and I'm just biased, but what you gonna do? And I've said it before in the past, but these two are pretty similar to begin with, so them having similar designs even emphasizes my point further. Now, the reason I don't like character designs like Ainz or Sensei as much is really because I can't form that kind of connection with the character. Now, that might sound a bit weird, but when I'm watching an anime, I tend to do a certain level of projection onto the character. But going into the details is too much of a pain, so I'll just try and use an example. You'd probably find it easier to talk or relate to someone around your age rather than an adult that speaks a completely different language and looks completely different from what you're used to. Okay, that was probably a bad example, but you get the point. For me, a character's design is crucial to forming a connection. While characters like Ainz are cool, it's harder to project yourself onto a skeletal overlord. Rimuru, on the other hand, has both a creature form and a human form that's clean and versatile. This duality lets me enjoy the best of both worlds, which are a refreshing MC design and a relatable human form. That way I can almost never get bored of looking at them both. Plus, it makes it easier to have weird headcanons in my head. Don't ask and don't judge, we all do it. Now that pretty much sums up all my points. Now for the people who haven't caught on yet, the reason why I say Rimuru is the best isekai MC is because he doesn't have one specialty where he just fits there. He can do everything that any other good isekai character can do, not at the same level, but well above average. He's not as funny and comedically entertaining as Kazuma, but he definitely is entertaining to watch. And while Kazuma does have his moments where he gets serious for like a couple of seconds, putting Kazuma in a long-term serious moment or even a couple of minutes would feel completely wrong. because that's just not the type of character he is, and he doesn't fit that role. But I feel like if you put Rimuru in his place for a short time, while it wouldn't be as funny with Kazuma, I still think the story would be entertaining and better than your average isekai comedy. And while he's not as good as being an isekai classic like Sid, he has many of the things that Sid does well and that we enjoy, and does them to a reasonable degree. And yes, his character design isn't the best out there, but because of its flexibility, literally, it works out to being an enjoyable experience for my eyes. So Rimuru's not the best in only one specific thing, he's well above average in everything. You know what they say, a jack of all trades, master of none, oftentimes better than a master of one. That phrase fits Rimuru perfectly, and is one of the reasons why I think to this day, Rimuru is the king of isekai. But yeah, that's all I've got for you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you guys next week.